Well, what are we going to talk about today?
So today, I think it'd be really, hang on. Following on from what we were talking about in our introduction.
Yeah. I think we're both having a bit of a day. So I have a son out of work. I think I'm a little bit, I don't know, but I'm like, you know what? This almost feels like an opportunity to
Yeah.
focus on this and really,
Yeah.
you know what? It's opportunity. It's a space. Who knows
Yeah.
what can happen? Like that podcast we were just listening to was saying, when like these types of things happen, it's when you go, okay, and you kind of take stock and you're kind of like, okay, we're healthy. Oh,
Yeah.
we're okay. And it also, I think, forces you to be a bit more creative and a bit more curious about what's next. What do I need to do? Where to from here? Instead of, and it just makes you a little bit more conscious, I think.
Yeah. I agree. I think many people ask me how I continue to be creative and open and diverse, how I shift, how I try different things. And I think one of the biggest elements and driving forces of it is because I've basically been outside of my comfort zone for about 25 years.
Yeah.
I think that there's this beautiful vision we get of artists and photographers and writers of in their studio in the calm with the music and the plants and the painting away and we often long for those times of clarity. And wouldn't it be amazing to like hole away in a house for a week and just paint and create?
Oh yeah, like a residency or house. It
Yes.
seems so romantic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
But it's so interesting, isn't it? Because actually there have been times in my life when I've had more time
Yeah.
and things have been a bit more comfortable, and I've stopped creating as much and I've stopped pushing myself. And it was so interesting listening to the poet Cleo Wade on Simon Sinek's podcast when she was talking about, you don't ask questions when you're happy. You go, this is lovely. I'm really happy and I'm just going to enjoy this moment. And then when catastrophe happens, when life changes, when you get sick and you can't do what you were doing before, or you move house and the people or the access to whoever you were shooting or creating with or creating for aren't there anymore, and you have to ask those questions. And it's so interesting because I think creativity, a lot of people have this vision that creatives are in this place of comfort and happiness and a little bit of navel gazing and a little bit of like gazing out of the window. I remember when I was learning to drive in England, and I remember getting in the car. I was 17 and the driving instructor said to me, "Oh, what A levels are you studying?" And I said art and art history, and he was like, "Oh." I was like, "Why? Random." And he said, artists are always so hard to teach because they spend all the time looking out the window. And I was like, okay. And I think I'm actually a pretty good driver. But so it was really funny, and it actually stayed with me because I think, it's slightly different to what we're talking about here. We're talking about this discomfort. But I for a very long time, even from sort of my childhood, have been in this place of discomfort and question about human behavior, about relationships, about all sorts of things, moving and disruption. Basically, there's been constant disruption, and I really believe it fuels my creativity because as Cleo Wade says, you don't ask the questions when you're happy.
That's another gap of us. So you've moved all over the world. You've experienced all these incredible cultures and people. I've lived in the same council area for my whole life.
Yeah.
I've lived in 3 different houses.
Yeah.
4, actually. I've lived in 4 different houses
Yeah.
in my 44 years.
Yeah.
And that, for a lot of years and during a lot of stages, has really grated on my nerves and my soul. And, you know, I question a lot of the time, and I sort of almost sometimes feel a bit resentful of being in the same area all the time, like my whole life.
Right.
And I have this, like, you know, almost, it feels bigger than a dream of just like moving away and completely starting again and just seeing what happens.
Okay.
But then I don't, because I come back to, what about the boys? All of my family's here, you know, and it's that total,
The embeddedness.
yep.
Yeah. So do you feel that you've been in a space of comfort, and you feel that maybe if you uprooted and traveled a little bit or went to live somewhere else, that it would shift your perspective and your ability to create? Or is it really more rooted in your curiosity and interest?
I think definitely curiosity, but also more in the sense of being curious about myself
Mm-hmm.
and what would come up for me moving to a different place.
Yeah.
And so when I then am in that discomfort, or that maybe it would be an even bigger comfort, or, you know, just a different place, who am I as that woman?
Okay. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, if I'm that woman, then what do I create? Like, what would my writing be like? What would my photography be like? What would my conversations be like?
Yeah.
And that feels exciting, but also uncomfortable, because it's like, well, who would I be if I moved away from my children? Because they're 21 and 18 now. Like, they could move out. Like, we could move, you
Yeah.
know? Who would I be if I didn't have all of my close friends around me? Who would I be if I didn't have my mum near me? Or, you know, like,
Yeah.
because we have Sunday roast dinners every Sunday, and like, we have a support system, and we have, you know, people
Yeah.
that we know, and
Yeah.
I go to the same shopping centre for my groceries. And, you know, who would I be if I didn't know the lady at the checkout?
Yeah. But don't forget that, and this actually is interesting because I was talking to my 11-year-old this morning about it. You know, nothing is forever, and you can put timelines on things, and you can make a choice to do it temporarily. I've definitely got to the point now where I don't necessarily think too hard about, well, I do now, but I definitely haven't done in the past, of putting our belongings into a storage container and going somewhere else for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because I think when you sort of, you know, dare I say it, broken the seal of that moving and of that change, the possibilities become wide and open and less scary and less severing, I think, you know, because I think the first time you do it, and that, I guess that's why a lot of people do it when they're young, so the severing doesn't feel so brutal, but you do it when you're older and it feels literally like there's this whole this whole community and tapestry that you're part of. And if by moving yourself and your life somewhere else, even if it's just for a while, you are literally feel like you're unpicking every thread that you've sewn yourself into. And I think that is I can totally understand how that would be really hard. And it's like there was something going around the internet saying you just have to choose your hard. And it's exactly right. You have to choose your hard, because actually going looks really glamorous, but it's actually really hard. It's easy to perceive when you go to live an expat life. It looks really glossy and really amazing, but actually there are so many challenges that unless you've done it, it's really difficult to explain the intricacies of it. And I think that's what's really fascinating. But you saying, I don't know who that Melinda would look like. As you know, recently my husband and I have parted ways, and I was talking to someone recently about it, and they said, you saw him recently, was that really hard? And I said, was it really sad? Was it really this? Was it really that? And I said, well, the thing is I'm not the same person as I was when we married in 2010. And he is not the same person as he was in 2010. And it's so exaggerated because we've lived in 5 countries, numerous houses. We've been through loss. We've been through birth. We've been through so many different things. It's really compounded the fact that we've had so many experiences and stretched our minds and our hearts and our courage and everything. I look back at the 2 people that stood in that olive grove in Italy, and we are not those people anymore. So in many ways it is sad, but we've gone through that phase and we've come out the other side. And if we were to try and work on it, we wouldn't be working it. And I know that's the same with every marriage and every relationship and every passing of time. But I definitely feel that there's this exaggeration of that fact because we've had the added experiences and changes and moves and that sort of thing. So
You've evolved so much together in
yes.
so many different situations. This is another evolution of the 2 of you.
Yeah. I would encourage people to travel, but it comes with a little bit of a warning.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, as you say, there's so much to it.
But I think, speaking about creativity and creating in the comfort and discomfort, I think when, for example, someone like yourself who's lived in the same place, in the same street, in the same house for such a long period of time, I think there are a number of people like that, and they get to the point where they get really stuck creatively. And sometimes it's about pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and asking those questions and finding those questions. And it's really that finding the questions, because that's really all creativity is. It's going, okay, so I have a problem, or I have something that I'm wondering about, or I have a situation that I basically want to explore, and I'm going to put a question out into the world through my chosen medium and explore it. Like we were talking about in the introduction, you go out and you see some light or see or meet up with a subject and you explore that moment.
Yeah, and I think too, you explore it and then different questions come up.
Yeah, it's like a spidergram.
Yeah. And the question that you may have gone in with, that adds to the discomfort, because sometimes in your mind you're like, go in and you're like, this is the question I want answered. And you have to be open to maybe that question not being answered in that particular process.
Yeah.
And maybe it is something else that comes up, or a different question, or a different, discomfort, and something else comes out of it.
Yeah.
And you're still left with that initial question and you're like, that's what I want answered.
Yeah.
But this come out of it.
Yes, exactly. And I think that there is elements of it in terms of, we talk about manifesting, and when you manifest something, it's essentially putting a question into the world, say, I want to make this happen. Come on, universe, world,
Show me what to
time.
do.
Can this happen? And And by putting it out into the world and going, for example, for you, making a book, or for me, go, this is, so 2024, say we have new manifestations and we go, okay, I want to have an exhibition of my work in 2024. By putting it out into the world, writing it down, your brain then starts going through well, how do I make it happen?
Yes. Why do I want to make it happen?
Yes. Yeah. So then your natural curiosity, your subconscious brain, your conversations that you have with people, the connections that you make. And that really is, I often talk when I mentor people, I talk about raising the questions, raising who you are as a creative up to the surface, thinking about it consciously. I can never say that word, consciously. Working on it for a while and then letting it drop down into your subconscious again. So therefore it becomes part of your blueprint, part of the way you work. So,
Yep.
And that's what essentially creativity is, isn't it? Is about the doing of you bring it up to the surface. You question, you go, okay, well, what would this drop of paint look like on this canvas? Or what would these words feel like if I put them into this sentence? Or, and so you raise them up, you pull them together, and then you let them settle for a while, and then you revisit them. And it's just this process of sort of bringing it up and pushing it down, bringing it up and pushing it down. Like that is where this level of comfort and discomfort lie, because what we're doing as creatives is we have all of these things bubbling away at us, whether it's life experience or whether it is education. And when we create, we, to a certain level, subconsciously, but sometimes consciously, we bring it up. Then we raise the camera to our face or pen or paintbrush, and then we create, and then we let it go down again. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, because I actually started sharing about this on my social media, and I have clients that follow me, and I'm like, oh, maybe they think that I'm going to turn up to a session and all of a sudden like start bringing up, but it's not about that. It's about it's part of our ability to seek out the beauty when things don't feel quite right in us. It's that settling of, and that's definitely my sort of visual journaling, is that there are definitely rumbles in my life, in everything that kind of are happening, and everybody globally that's on a massive scale. But by being able to bring it up, view things in the world and go, okay, well, that's beautiful. That's right now. This is what's happening. It's containing it in many ways.
I think too, that's the same. It's similar to how I have my mentoring conversations with the ladies that I work with. So it's coming to the space and talking about what you want to create. And there's that gap of, well, I'm here, I want to be here. And then it's exploring it with the questions of, so what is the question you've got? Why do you want to do it? And having I call it remembering.
Yeah.
So it's you've had this thought or this need to create something, and that's something in your heart and soul. And so the more that you, as you said, let it come, go, bring it up, talk about it, dream about it, bring it into your, conscious mind and build a relationship with it.
Yeah.
And then, you explore it. And then, what you initially thought it could be, the more you sort of learn about it and about yourself, and then you kind of let it go down, and then it'll come back up again. And it really is this beautiful, like we've talked about, layering of what you create.
Yeah.
And it's very much asking the questions that can be incredibly uncomfortable and that you may not want to face, and that make you feel a bit like, oh God. But then when you actually do sit with it and almost, I call it marinating. Like when you marinate your meat and it's, that crappy meat that you buy and it's quite hard, and then you marinate it and it's the most delicious meat you've ever eaten. Or like your compost, you chuck all your shit in and then leave it, and it composts down into the most beautiful, incredible material for your garden that just then blooms these incredible
Yeah.
flowers. I kind of think of it as the same, like you're forever working with it, letting it rest, coming back to it, asking more questions, digging a bit deeper. And I think with the constant conversations over a period of time, you almost don't realize that you're inching one action step at a time closer to your dream.
Yeah.
It's not this big, like, it's not going to hit you in the face. It's just this beautiful kind of almost stroll through what you're creating.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And I love that marinating that you were talking about. There are lots of things that marinate in my brain on a regular basis. Surprised I don't have like mushrooms growing out of my ears and stuff. But I absolutely love that. And I'm the same. I remember when I wrote my book, I'd been thinking about it and marinating it for about 6 years. I would love to have an art space, and every different place that I've moved to. I remember even Kuala Lumpur. So I trained in Paris, and then immediately afterwards we went to Kuala Lumpur, and I had my son, and very quickly I had this dream of having this space, and I actually went to look at one. And Claire Barker Wells and I were friends at the time, and I took her along, and we were like talking about where we'd put the chair and where we'd have the studio split. Like, it never happened because we then left. But every time, because my dream one day is to have a studio / photography space with a photography library of books and all of these amazing things.
Can't wait to visit.
Yeah, it will happen one day. I can't tell you where it's going to be. But it's marinating, and I think
Yeah.
that is what the power is. And sometimes what I love as well is you ask those questions, you say, okay, this is uncomfortable. My dad always says you don't change something until you really have to. And I think that's what creativity, that's when you start getting creative, and that's when you start getting curious, because you go, this is uncomfortable for whatever reason, or this is not sitting with me. And then you go, okay, well, what can I do about it? And then that happens. And then even if you have this big dream, like my space, along the way, you get to do it in little ways. Sometimes, you get to do it a little bit here and a little bit there, and then you learn a lesson from here, and you don't get to go from, A to M without missing all the other steps in the middle. You have to go through those steps, and I think about it in terms of athletes. They train, they have to dig in when they're doing a really hard training session. They have to dig in really, really deep. They push themselves, they do the training session, and then they come back, and then they let themselves rest. They let their muscles rest. They refuel. They do all of those things. And it's exactly the same with creativity. Exactly the same.
And I think personally, social media has taken that away from creatives, because you feel like you need to be creating every single day.
Yeah.
And you need to be pushing stuff out every single day. And it's such a beautiful process when you're doing like a project or and some things can be created very quickly, and that's the process of it. Then there is some things that take that bit longer, and you do need to maybe put it aside, or you need to rest, or you need to maybe dig in and look after yourself a little bit more, be a bit kinder to yourself, or in that process. And I think it's about being present in the process of what's being created at that point.
Yeah.
Like, because the
And
process
sometimes being patient and not sharing it.
Exactly.
Because if you share it, then all of a sudden it shifts. The energy shifts, because you start judging it, and you prepare yourself for other people to judge it. And I think that's something that's rarely talked about, is that actually there's an element of waiting, and an element of that marination. Is that even a word? I don't think that's a word. But that marinating from even when in the process, but even once you've created it, when you've pulled together. I've done projects pre-social media when I was studying and then in my early days. And actually, the results that I've shared as the project as a whole, sometimes the first couple of pictures were the strongest, and they are the lead images, and they are the ones that go on the cover or go, they are the lead images. But if you share them, I did this when I did my self-portrait series with Zoe Wittering. The first picture that I shared, it was a 52 project. The first picture I shared, basically, I think was one of my strongest pictures, and it almost set me up for failure. Like, honestly, I was just like, I can't beat that image. That's basically it. And it's not about beating it, but it's about, it's that summing up and having that ability to understand. And I also think it's funny you should mention social media, because I also think that the other side of it is that because we have answers at our fingertips, and other people have asked these questions and put the answers on the internet, and it is hard to ask questions and it is hard to dig in. It's easier just to sit and scroll, or go on your phone and find an answer, or go, well, somebody else has done it, so I'm not going to ask. And we're kind of softening our discomfort by going, okay, well, that's too hard to think about, so I'm just going to sit and look at other people's pictures and it's going to make me feel better. Or and I think that is also a massive challenge for creatives, because these beautiful, fresh, unique, something else, Cleo said in this podcast with Simon was, there's no right, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's only you. And she says that right at the beginning, and I just love it so much, because it's so true. And I think there's what we're doing so often in social media is going on and going, that person's done it that way, so that must be the right way. I don't like what they're doing, so that must be the wrong way. And there's this constant judgment, rather than going, okay, well, I'm here, I'm me, I'm in New Zealand. I know at the moment I have maybe a disconnection with people. I have lots of things going on that are uncomfortable, but I also am in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. I have mountains and I have rivers and I have open space and very little light pollution, so I get to see the stars every night. And I go, actually, I have access to things where I can find the answers to questions, even if I can't answer the other questions right now. And I can, and I can channel that, which is really about what we do. It's like re-channeling the pain.
And I just want to swing back to what we were talking about with the discomfort of, travel, being expat versus staying where we are. You just said, what do we have access to?
Mm-hmm.
As you said, you are in New Zealand. It's incredible. The landscape's incredible. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's safe. It's, and someone on the internet may be looking at that going, wish I could take photos of, a beautiful river like that, or those mountains, and there is that disconnect of, well, actually, I don't have access to that.
Mm.
I don't have access to that landscape or those people, or, and we judge ourselves so harshly sometimes by what we do see on the internet, when actually, if we just came back to, okay, so this is the question that I've got. What do I have access to that can answer that question for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not about being in competition with anyone else. It's not. We judge others and ourselves so harshly sometimes, especially when you are in that discomfort or that panic or that feeling of, well, nothing's happening for me. Whereas it's so easy to fall into that gap or that hole. And I think it's a hard practice, but I think if we can come back to, this is my practice, this is what I have access to, this is my question, and just be kind to ourselves in what answer comes out, from what we have access to.
Yeah.
Like, I do feel like if I had access to mountains and rivers and incredible stars, it just, even talking about it, it just feels like this, like, cracking open and just like this freedom and beauty, and imagine what could be created. And then I come back to, well, what do I have access to that could give me that same feeling? And for me, that's the ocean. Like, we're half an hour from the ocean.
Yeah.
Oh, it's up.
Is that half an hour?
Half an hour.
Wow. All the good things. I've got so many other things I want to talk about.
This 30 minutes is going to be a real problem, isn't it?
I think it's good. I think it's good because it's what we have access to. It's what we have access to, particularly as women and mothers, and time. As we talked about in the introduction, it's having that access of headspace.
Yeah.
And, you know, filling a gap in time with questions and ideas and thoughts which might trigger for our listeners. Yeah.
But I wanted to keep going. I couldn't keep talking. Oh, well. Next week.